Welcome. Good morning. Welcome or welcome back. If you're here for the first time, I want to welcome you to Coffee Breaks with Steve. And if you're coming back to Coffee Breaks with Steve, you know you're in the right place right now. And we've got another I think it's an interesting topic. And so I want you to be prepared to talk about it as well. We're going to be talking about the best boss we ever had and the worst boss we ever had. Good bosses, bad bosses, and what is it about those people that makes them so? So put on the brakes, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation because it's time for Coffee Breaks with Steve. And indeed, good morning. It is Saturday, August 26, 2023. And if you are joining live, I want to welcome you. Say hello to a few people here. Kim Baker is on. And Jerry Zetterval, good morning. I suspect there are probably some more people out there who are signing in. So if you are coming in, please make sure that we know that, yes, Moderator Cat is here. And if you are tuning in live, please make sure that you say hello so that we know that you're here and can acknowledge you. And when we get into our topic, I'm looking for some active interaction and feedback today. This is really the first, I think the first episode in a while that I've been entirely alone. We had guests for months in a row, and then I have been recruiting Shalane to co-host for several weeks, and part of that is because some of the topics we've been discussing are ones that she actually suggested, and my thought was, if you're the one suggesting it, you need to be the one to say what we talk about here. But I'll be perfectly honest with you. I've gotten to the point that I just really enjoy having other people to interact with verbally live. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that I want to interact with you. So make sure that you do get into the conversation. I will do my best to interact on the chat with you or respond to your comments in the chat. Hey, Jay Zetterval, good to see you. And all by myself. That's right, Moderator Cat. I am here. And I do want to... I said hello to Kim Baker, but I did not acknowledge the good meowing afternoon and happy Catterday. So thank you for that as well. And to all of you who are on here. Because I don't have anybody to, spend a lot of time just chatting with, I'm probably going to get to our special days pretty quickly. But just curious how everybody's week has gone. Weather-wise, work-wise, whatever else you've been doing this week. Mine was, I think, relatively low-key. It kind of runs together after a while, and particularly right now. I mentioned, I think over the last couple of weeks, Carol being out of town, and I've had some interaction with other family members, and both live and online. Carol and I are video chatting every evening. That makes a big difference. In the past, when one or the other of us was away on business for even a short period of time, even just a few days, and we didn't have video chatting, we didn't have the ability to actually see each other's faces, and we could still talk by telephone, and that was better than nothing. But it still left that it was a much stronger sense of being apart, and it still doesn't replace being in the same place together. I'm actually going to be flying out to the East Coast to meet with Carol, meet with Carol. Sounds like a business meeting, to spend some time there with her. And then we'll come back home together. And she's working right now on this for a consulting company and working on this contract that is hybrid. And so she'll be spending time back east, and then she'll be working from home part of the time. And our goal is, we're kind of getting the schedule put together with the client. She's getting that schedule put together. And the goal is that when she does have to be back east for a period of time, that I will join her for part of that time so that we can be there together. And we can also have some adventures. There's some great places to go in the fall. And We're actually even going to be back there in the winter, it looks like at times. And so that's going to be kind of interesting too. But I'll fill you in as that's coming up. If there are interesting places that we go to and I can integrate those into coffee breaks episodes and share some of those with you, I will definitely do that. But I may also be looking for insights from some of you who are from different parts of the country that we might be in or living on the East Coast now, and get some insights and ideas about things that we might do. So, hey, Carla, good to see you here. And did I forget what Carol looked like? Fortunately, because of the video calls, I still kind of remember. And but there is another thing about that, and that is that I have a tendency, because I know I'm going to, even if I've just been sitting around the house all day, and sitting around the house, I mean, I'm doing things, but it's just me. And it's really kind of interesting that when I know I'm going to be talking to Carol in the evening, I kind of want to, at least make sure that my hair's combed and that kind of stuff. It's almost, it's like kind of like having an online date. When we can talk in the evenings, that absence makes the heart grow fonder. Definitely, I'm missing Carol, but there's something about those video calls that makes me look forward to wanting to see her, but also wanting her to see her honey looking good. So anyway, that's just kind of, I guess, it's either a fun fact or it's way too much information, depending on how you view it. But yeah, how has your week gone? What have you been up to? How have things been going? There's still a lot going on in the world around us on the news, and I have to be careful how much news I watch, because it can start to become overwhelming at times, and you don't as often see just good news. I will go out and find good news stories, and I subscribe to some social media sites that just share upbeat, positive things, because they're just, the news is obviously often going to be the most negative things that are happening around us, and I can only take so much of that. So let's get on to our special days this week and talk a little bit about what's coming up in the week of, get myself back on the screen here with this. There we go. Whoops, that's the wrong perspective. Let's make me little and the special days big. That's how we'll do it. This is what happens when, see, I'm here by myself. Nobody's supervising. Well, moderator Cat is on here supervising what I'm doing, fortunately, and Shalene's not here, so somebody else has to cover this part. Everybody drink, right? Okay. Special days the week of August 22nd, and get this, to September 1st. We're getting to the end of August. Do you realize that as of yesterday, there is, I think, four shopping months, September, October, till Christmas. 4 months from yesterday was Christmas. Yikes, right? Hey, today is National Women's Equality Day. And what is that? National Women's Equality Day recognizes the passing of the 19th Amendment in 1920 on this date, that gave women in the United States the right to vote. And up until that time, it was women. We all know about the women's suffrage movement and stuff. To me, it's still somewhat amazing that just basically barely over 100 years ago, that women still didn't have the right to vote. If you notice that I'm kind of stalling, it's because I was pulling something up here that I want to look at while we're talking. But that's, today is the celebration of that. So women, you can raise your fists in defiance and celebration and victory. And you know what? There's still a lot of glass ceilings out there. There's still a lot of things that women have to fight to still gain equality around. And so we're not all the way there yet. I don't know if we ever will be all the way there. There's probably always going to be some fights to fight, but women got the right to vote on this date. Okay, I got to where I needed to. I can quit stalling. This is tomorrow is World Rock, Paper, Scissors Day. You play that game? Do you ever play rock, paper, scissors in order to see who goes first with something? This is what I was trying to pull up. There's a little bit of history around this that I thought would be interesting to share. It is considered, rock, paper, scissors is considered the oldest hand game in the world. The game dates all the way back to the Chinese Han Dynasty in the era that began 206 BC and ended in 220 AD. There are also accounts of this game in Japanese history. The earliest versions of this game consisted of a slug, snake, and frog. And I'm not sure, you'll have to figure out for yourself. We know that in rock, paper, scissors, that rock crushes scissors, paper covers rock, scissors cuts paper. So there's a cyclical element to it. But I'm not sure with the slug, snake, and frog exactly what trumped what. The scissors, rock, paper, scissors used in a later version of the game developed in the 17th century. It wasn't until the 1920s, after women in the United States got the right to vote, that the popular Asian hand game made its way to Great Britain. In 1932, an article in the New York Times described the rules of rock, paper, scissors. Now, it says that it goes on in this little article to say, throughout the years, many people have developed strategies to win rock, paper, scissors. Some people who lose the first round switch to using the thing their opponent used to beat them. Others lean on statistics to help them win. And these people will throw each thing 1/3 of the time. Here are the exact statistics for how often each of the elements is played. Rock is played 35.4% of the time. Paper is played 35% of the time, and scissors 29.6% of the time. By the way, this article does not indicate exactly where all this information came from, so I can't vouch that every bit of it's accurate, but it sure sounds good. And there's further in here that talks about where it came from and different elements of it. And it says the World Rock, Paper, Scissors Association in Ottawa, Ontario, created this day, the celebration of this day on August 27th in 2014, 9 years ago. Their goal was to encourage as many people as possible to play this game for fun, as well as in decision-making process. World Rock, and it is World Rock, Paper, Scissors game. It's not just a national thing. We're supposed to celebrate this around the globe tomorrow. So you make sure you get in touch with anybody you know on the other side of either ocean, or maybe in Antarctica, for all I know, and play rock, paper, scissors with them, because we're supposed to be doing that. It's a way to celebrate the only game that, regardless of language, gender, or age, everyone has a chance to win. All right, that's kind of fun. Let's see what else we've spent. Let's see, should we go on? Rock, paper, scissors. Okay, we're going on. The 28th is National Bow Tie Day. Part of the reason I love this one is a personal story, and some of you on here know this. It's about my grandson, Nicholas. And several years ago, and I think moderator Kat may be able to verify this, but I think Nicholas was 4 years old. I think this was like 4 years ago. It was like before COVID. And I was, at the time, we were living in California, and I was working at the Bankhead Theater in Livermore. And the Bankhead Theater brings in live performances of touring companies and other a variety of performances. And if, for those of you who have been on here and have met Derek Nelson, musician, when he's joined us on Coffee Breaks, that is where I met Derek and his siblings when they were touring. And in fact, I had met Derek and his brother and his sister earlier in that week as they were doing some workshops with younger students in the Bankhead, and their concert was this particular night. And so we decided this would be a great one to bring Nicholas to for his first live concert. And his as parents were getting him dressed at our house, he wanted to get dressed up, and he asked, 4 years old, if he could wear a front of neck. And it took everybody a few minutes to figure out what he was talking about, but he wanted to wear a bow tie. He had seen other people wearing bow ties, and it happened that we had some bow ties in the house that were there for our older grandsons who rarely wore them. And so Nicholas wore a front of neck to his first concert, and that's still how we refer to bow ties in our family. But the other thing about it is that when I saw this picture, it reminded me of someone. Can you guess who I thought of when I saw this particular picture? I'm going to give you a moment and see if anybody gets the response. There is a slight delay, so I'm going to give it a moment and take a sip. All right, I'm not seeing anything. Okay, now I'm seeing some answers start to come in. So when I saw this particular picture, I thought of Pee Wee Herman. I mean, if you look and compare it, you almost expect this camera to pan up and see Pee-wee's face. And we know that we just recently lost Paul Reubens, the actor who played Pee-wee Herman, but it reminded me of our good friend Pee-wee Herman when I saw that bow tie. But was that National Bow Tie Day? National Bow Tie Day, August 28th. All right, Pee-wee. And then August 29th, it's interesting. We were talking about rock, paper, scissors and, games, because August 29th is According to Hoyle Day. Now, many of you know that there are rule books around a lot of card games, and many of those began with Hoyle. And we hear about, such and such according to Hoyle in the game. August 29th. So this is actually named after the author of the book, Edmund Hoyle, an Englishman who was thought to be the first technical writer on card games, born in 1672. And at the age of 69, he began teaching a card game called Whist to wealthy high social members in London. And this article goes on. I know I was looking stuff up as I was coming up with these games. I usually do. But he started writing and recording the rules of a variety of games, collecting these, and is thought to be the first person to have done that, and then selling the books with the rules. And Hoyle died on August 26, 1769, at the age of 97. So this is commemorating Edmund Hoyle. Is that what? Yeah, Edmund Hoyle. So I had to go back and check my own notes there. But I'm obviously need someone else here to chat with, or I just go off on articles. This one's more serious. August 30 is National Grief Awareness Day. And it's, listen, grief is something that impacts, I think, everyone at one time or another. And the interesting thing is grief is not just about death. Grief and how we experience grief comes in a variety of ways. And, we've all read articles and read books and perhaps met with counselors and others talking about the grief cycle and the various stages that we go through when we experience grief. And one of the things that I learned along the way in dealing with grief is that you don't just work through the cycle and you get to the end and you're finished. Is grief has a way of bouncing up at inopportune times. I mean, you re-experience some of the elements of grief around things that have brought that on in the first place. So it's just a time to be aware, to take a look. This is not that, again, August 30th is not the only time that anyone deals with grief, but the reason that there is a Grief Awareness Day is an opportunity to do a self-check. Just see how you're doing emotionally, mentally. Are you dealing with anything that you need to get some help with? Do you know someone who has got, maybe they've gone through it recently, or maybe it's been a while, but it's just good to check in on them again. So without getting on too big a soapbox about this, remember the people around us, and also remember to take a look in the mirror when it comes to dealing with these things. And then the 31st is National Eat Outside Day. We're getting to that time of year. The seasons are going to start transitioning soon, but most of us are still getting at least moments of good weather. And it's just an opportunity to get outside. And this is on Thursday. So I don't know whether, you can't necessarily take the day off. Maybe you're already on vacation, but even in the evening, go spread a picnic blanket out. Go sit, sometimes we can go to a restaurant that has a terrace or a patio and sit outside. Even our coffee shops. Yes, also known as National Yellow Jacket. There probably is a National Yellow Jacket Day, by the way. Somewhere on there. We know there's a day for everything. So I'm sure we'll run across that. But yeah, when you get outside, National Ants and Yellow Jackets Day. So that's the 31st. And then September 1st, which is Friday, is National No Rhyme, No Reason Day. And this one is, interestingly, it's like, well, what are we talking about? Nothing with rhyme or reason. We're actually talking about this day actually commemorates, and again, I'm trying to go back to get to an article here. Words that don't, in English language, that don't rhyme. I just thought it was great that they included the no reason. It's like we can come up with all kinds of ways to celebrate September 1st and say, I'm celebrating something got no rhyme or reason. But this article lists several words in the English language that are unrhymable or nearly unrhymable, they say. And there are ways you'll hear poets and songwriters sometimes do what are called imperfect rhymes or interior rhymes where they can come close to making something rhyme and still get it into a song. But these are some of the words in the English language that are thought to be unrhymable or nearly so. Orange. I can't remember where I saw this once, that somebody said you could rhyme orange with door hinge. That's a stretch, but hey, you could make it work. Month, silver, spirit. By the way, I challenge any of you, please come up with nothing inappropriate, but if you can come up with a word that rhymes any of these, stick it in the chat. Orange, month, silver, spirit, chimney, purple, woman, ninth, and pint. Pint seems like there should be something, but I'm not going to worry about trying to think about it right now because I would need a lot more coffee to get to that. Sporange. Thank you, Carla. I'm going to add that. I mean, look, a lot of words have to start someplace, right? There's entire slang dictionaries. I also want to mention, I saw it in the chat here a minute ago, but I want to mention a birthday as well. Oh, I'm sorry. First, there's another one on September 1st. It is National Chicken Boy Day, September 1st. I forgot that I stuck that in there because I was like, what, the what? September 1st, National Chicken Boy Day honors the birthday of an interesting statue in California. It's in the LA, it's somewhere in LA. And I didn't look up exactly where, although I'm sure I could find it. Chicken Boy is this statue that you're seeing here that stands 22 feet tall and holds a bucket of chicken. The fiberglass statue of a boy with a chicken head can be seen along Route 66. He is named after the former 1960s Chicken Boy restaurant, also known as the Statue of Liberty of Los Angeles. He joins other notable food characters such as Big Boy and Ronald McDonald. So, here's to you, Chicken Boy. And that's actually, I think if I came across that, I might actually be just a bit freaked. And then I do want to mention a birthday that's coming up this week on the 29th on Tuesday is my nephew, Joshua Ford. And you can see I found a picture of the two of us together. I actually found another picture of the two of us together just to prove that Joshua and I have known each other for a variety of years and have at times spent time together. And you can see that we both look exactly the same now as we did then, some probably close to 40 years ago this picture was taken. Wow. But anyway, happy birthday to Joshua this week. If you have a special day this week that I did not mention because I forgot about it, because I need a lot more coffee in my life, because I'm getting old and forgetting things in general, you can please put it in the chat so we can celebrate with you right now. And if you've got one coming up in the month of September and you would like us to make sure that we include it, you can email at cbwsteve@comcast.net. I will get that email. I will read that email and I will include you in the appropriate week of your special celebration. And it can be whatever you feel like celebrating. That's just a lot of talking on my part. Wow. See, this is the other thing. When I have somebody else to talk to, I do briefly stop talking just for a moment. Now I have to do this in order to briefly stop talking. I want to talk about bosses, and I want you to join in this conversation. Shalane was the one who recommended this. Shalane's not here, but I'm sure that she'll later on when she can do so. And there's a reason for it. I mean, she's not just bogeing out. She is out of town and doing some things this weekend, and so gave her a pass on this. And what choice did I have? But we talk about this. I'm going to set just the only ground rule I'm really going to set for our conversation, because you may need to vent or even rant a little bit about a boss. We're not going to throw anyone under the boss bus. I would prefer not to have anyone share names of particularly a bad boss. If you want to brag on a great boss and share their name and give them a trophy here on Coffee Breaks, I'm okay with that. What I want to avoid is having somebody throw out somebody's name and rant on that person in a negative way. So what I'd like you to do if you're going to talk about a boss, and I'll follow the same rule, is to refer to them generically. If you're going to give them a name, give them a fake first name, or I guess you could use their real first name, but try not to associate it with anything that would make it obvious who it is. Okay, we're going to keep it civil while we talk about worst and best bosses. And I'm curious from your perspective, and I'll share some of mine. What makes somebody a bad boss or a good boss? Why was someone your worst boss, and why was someone your best boss? I think sometimes, and I know this is true for me, I have to be really reflective and say that there are times that I may have considered someone a bad boss, and really the job was a bad fit for me. The boss was just trying to get me into the mode of what I needed to do, and it just wasn't a good fit. And it created that tension, that unfortunate situation where I just was constantly stressed by interaction with my boss. It doesn't necessarily mean they were a bad boss, but I think that's important to think about too, is what made someone a worst boss? What made someone a best boss? And being able to also differentiate between whether the job fit or didn't fit, whether it was the boss was really a bad boss, or if we're honest and say, no, I wasn't necessarily the best employee in the world. I think another thing to think about, and I'm curious about, that we're going to talk about a little bit, is, does being a bad boss automatically make someone a bad person? Or is it just that they're not good at managing? By the same token, does being a good boss automatically make somebody a good person? You can have a great boss and they're not somebody you'd want to hang out with outside of work. I've had very skilled bosses in my career who, it was great to know that they were managing things well, running things well, and they were effective at what they were doing, but I would never want to hang out with them socially. We had nothing in common outside of work. And or I knew things about their lifestyle that were, from my perspective, maybe a bit unsavory, but they were still good at the office. I could respect the job. I could respect following their orders at work, and still disapprove of things that they might have been doing in their personal life that I was aware of, or what I knew about things in their background or their past. You got to separate those things sometimes. Now, I will admit, I think leadership includes certain standards in life, and I think there are circumstances where things that are going on in someone's life outside of work can affect their effectiveness as a boss. It can also affect their effectiveness as an employee. Good leadership also requires good followership. To say that, I've been on both sides, and I don't know that I've always been the best boss for any number of reasons, not out of intent, but sometimes just not able to apply the right skill sets to managing the people in the setting they were in, or maybe not having good direction myself from up above. But I will talk a little bit about my worst boss, or the bosses that I would kind of put into that category. And thank you, by the way. I see that some of you are already putting some comments here. Kim, by the way, I have to go back. I'm reading some of the comments from earlier. Kim Baker would suddenly very much like a Happy Meal. Yeah, I get that. Carla saying, I once had a boss who was a lot like Michael Scott of The Office, except not as nice. Yeah. Swingers. Were you referring to lifestyle situations there, Carla? I'm not sure exactly how that applied. Good boss, listens to feedback, acts on it. This was, I think, moderator Cat putting this one on. Communicates why they can't, won't. Bad boss, doesn't listen, thinks they have their finger on the pulse of the workplace when they don't, makes bad or no decisions with little or no communication. I think I would tend to agree that those are all qualities, but I've got an article I'm going to refer to here in a few minutes that talks about differences between a good and bad boss. I think my worst boss was in one of my previous careers. I had two 20-year careers. I had one career that was in insurance and employee benefit administration, and then I had a second 20+ year career as working in the nonprofit industry. And in my first career, I was in a situation where the company I was working for, the way it was organized, one entire division and focus of the company was located in the office that I had a desk in, but I was part of another division. It's just to do my job in marketing and to have access to the clients, I had to be domiciled in this office. But my division was actually out of California. I was kind of a remote employee, so to speak. And the manager of the office that I was domiciled in, we'll call him, you mentioned Michael Scott before. I'll call him Michael. Okay, I'll just say Michael. Michael managed the office. He did not manage me, other than the fact that I occupied space in his office structure. However, that didn't stop him from making because he knew he wasn't my boss. He made every effort to undermine me whenever he could, to my face and behind my back, and really tried to make life very difficult for me. And I was aware of it most of the time it was happening. And he would do it very condescendingly and patronizingly. And when I say he would do it to my face, it was very passive aggressive behavior, but it was noticeable. And it was just the fact that he needed the power. Everything he did was about his position and his power. And it just stood the hairs up on him that he couldn't give me reviews. He couldn't judge my performance, but he could go behind my back to my real boss and that structure and say things about me that were not true, that tried to make it sound like I wasn't doing my job. And then it would come back to me from my bosses, well, we're hearing this. So just that kind of lack of integrity and undermining and power play type of stuff, that goes along with the worst boss. I had another boss also during that career path. Where's he? I'll go claw his eyes out. Carla, you mentioned another one here that I think is very true, that a good boss doesn't micromanage. And there's a difference. I mean, there are times when employees need closer supervision, training, or just if they're going through performance issues, that type of thing. But generally speaking, I would agree with you. I think my best bosses have made sure I was equipped and resourced with what I need. They communicated effectively, and then they released me to do my job, but made themselves available on a regular basis so that we could work together on moving things forward in a positive way. And those have been my best bosses. And Jay said something here. Jerry, this was Jerry. Respect was part of the reason I retired early, and I was given the opportunity to talk to her about it. Yeah. And I was going to mention, I had a boss in another setting who he had good qualities and bad qualities, but it was a very dysfunctional and toxic environment because he was very critical. He would yell at employees. He would technically he was very good at running the business. It was a small business, and he and one other owner ran the business. And they both had slightly different styles. They were both very much type A personalities. And I was in a manager role. He was president of the company, and I was one of the executive managers in the company. And so I oversaw staff. And my boss was intimidating, and being in management meetings was very intimidating and dysfunctional and disempowering, because he, and particularly one other of the managers, they would get into these yelling contests during meetings over things, just arguing, and they'd get done and they'd both be kind of like, oh, that felt good, type of an attitude. And it really shut everybody else down, particularly me, because that's not my style at all. I do not respond well to that kind of aggressive, in your face kind of style of work from anyone. I just don't. And finally, one of the things that they did, this was in my last year or so of working there, that they had a psychologist, an expert, management expert, come in and put all of us through, I think it was like the Myers-Briggs personality and style profile, and then kind of put all of us on the chart. And then as a follow-up, my boss and this consultant met with each of us individually to kind of talk through what our style came out to be. And I kind of knew what was coming when my meeting came. It was the afternoon of one of the work days, and they were there. And I mean, they didn't scold me for my style, but we talked through, and it was like I was the only manager on the team that didn't fit kind of into the, and I don't, believe me, I've gone through the Myers-Briggs and similar things several times, and I know what my letters are supposed to be. I just always, I have to go back and look. They're just letters of the alphabet. But whatever, I was the only one who wasn't in the category, in the quadrant that was more type A, more aggressive style of management. I tend to be more collaborative and want to work to empower my employees, that type of thing. So not surprisingly, during this meeting, as we went through my style, my boss afterwards, and he said this with a smile on his face, I don't think he meant it to be condescending. He said, yeah, he said, I've noticed that about you, that you're much more laid back. He says, I've never even heard you yell at any of your employees. And he kind of made it sound, he had several other comments, all of which made it sound like I wasn't effective because I didn't have the same style of management as he had. And so I left the meeting, I dealt with the meeting. I left the meeting, I went home and I stewed about it. And I talked to Carol about it. And it just started to make me grit my teeth. The more I thought about what he had said, it wasn't a surprise, but the more I thought about it, the more it really bothered me. And so I always knew that he always came into the office early. He was always one of the first people in. So I got there before him the next morning. And when I heard him come in, I went into his office. His office was right next to mine. And I shut the door and I said, I need to talk to you. And he's like, oh, okay. And I recapped what I had understood the previous day's meeting to be. And I told him, I said, I have to let you know that bothered me, that I think that my style is necessary here personally. And quite frankly, the style that you and several other of our management team exhibit here, I find to be dysfunctional and even toxic. I don't think that it leads to a collaborative and team building workforce. And if that's what you need from me in order for me to be, in your eyes, an effective employee, I'm probably not the right person for this job. Now, let me tell you what happened. Because I was scared to go in there because of his style and how I had often seen him react to things. He listened attentively to my entire set of comments, which probably went for a few minutes, probably not as long as my brain remembers, but 3 or 4 minutes of my letting him know how I felt about it. When I finished, he paused for a moment and he said, thank you for letting me know that. Thank you. He said, you're right. We do need more than one style here, and your style is necessary in this place. And we had a good conversation around it. He thanked me for coming in. He took the feedback that I gave him. And from that point, and in the remainder of my time at that company, we had a much different relationship, partly because my boss, I think, had more respect for me because of my stepping forward and sharing that. He respected that. And because having done that gave me a different perspective on recognizing my power and the necessity for me not to be passive, that if I was passive in that situation, not ignoring my style, but if I was passive and didn't address things effectively with my boss, I was not going to be effective in the job. And so it was a growing point for both of us, I think. I still saw him respond and react to things in ways that I didn't always think were healthy, but I also felt like we were on a much different footing after that. My best boss, let me talk just a little bit about my best boss. A couple of examples of this. By the way, I could mention another worst boss who did micromanage and as I think moderator Kat mentioned earlier, didn't understand the job, but critiqued me to a fault for the way that I approached doing the job. And I had a lot more expertise in doing it, and micromanaged and criticized and and it was not good. Best bosses, one specifically allowed me the freedom to really speak into what I was doing, to provide him with regular updates on what I was working on and what I thought needed to happen next. He would give me direction, but we had a great communication style on a regular basis. He showed me respect in the work that I was doing. I was a lone person doing the job. It happened to me in several situations where I was the person in the office doing that particular job. And we got along great. Now, his boss, part of that was reflected in his boss. His boss, who managed the entire division, was, I think, the best boss I ever worked under, who was like at that level. He was extremely knowledgeable about the business and about the industry, but he was also very interactive with his staff. He was very personable. He was very real. What you saw in his office, if you were in his office meeting with him on something, was the same thing you'd see when he was out on the floor or conducting a staff meeting, or if you encountered him outside the office and saw him with his family, which I did on a couple of occasions. He was the same person. And I think that's another example. Yes, we have to put on certain hats when we go to work. You do have to, I heard it once referred to as the knights in the medieval times would carry a silver sword when they were out in the place where they had to be the warrior. But when they'd come home, they'd hang that up and put the gold sword on, which indicated their place within their home being their castle, and their interaction changed. And I do think that we certainly have to sometimes set aside, put up certain barriers and walls of our personal life. If we're not careful, we can overstep certain things in the workplace. But I also think we still need to be genuine. All right. We still need to be who we are. If we're two completely different personalities in and out of work, there's an interesting show. I don't know if you've seen it. I just started watching it recently. I think it's on Apple Plus. It's called Severance. And I'm not going to go into the concept right now because we don't have time. But it's sort of this alternate reality science fiction mystery, almost terror type of thing, where these people have voluntarily, they work for this company and they voluntarily made a decision. It's kind of the extreme of work-life balance, that they've had this operation done where when they go into the office and they cross a certain barrier, this chip in their brain sets in and they don't know anything, don't remember anything about their personal life. It's basically they leave in the evening, and in their minds, their conscious mind in that persona, then the elevator reopens and they're back at work. Their personal life, they don't know. They know the company they work for, they know where they go to work, but they know nothing about their workday. They're severed. That's what's called severed. And it's bizarre, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. And I think that, it kind of points out that need to, separate and have a work-life balance. But I think that's less about not being genuine at work and more about making sure that you do take time away from work to be healthy, to be self-aware, to be engaged with family and others in your life, to have healthy hobbies and that type of thing. I think work-life balance is not about being phony at work. It's about being real in both situations, whatever real means, and genuine. I want to quickly read this part of this article, just elements of it. This is actually from an article from 2020 that was on a site called govloop.com. And I think it's primarily written for government employees, but it fits. And it's by a lady wrote this by the name of Tessie Davenport, who at the time this was written worked in the government. She was a leader in the Department of Defense and had been for 10 years. And she's written a number of articles on leadership. But this is what separates a good boss from a bad boss: when they make a mistake. And I'm going to just go over highlights. Bad bosses typically never admit when they're wrong. Instead, they blame their mistakes on other people. They won't take ownership of their mistakes, and so they don't ever help to create a better atmosphere. Good bosses will reflect on their actions and admit when they're wrong. They take ownership of their mistakes and apologize when necessary. Then it says, when it comes to employee performance, Bad managers let poor performance go unaddressed and great performance go unacknowledged. And again, I'm just cutting out a couple of sentences from each of these. There's more to this article. Good bosses communicate clear expectations with each employee. They also monitor performance, provide timely, pointed feedback. How they respond to negative feedback. This goes back to my story about the one interaction with my type A boss. Bad bosses respond poorly when given even the smallest amount of negative feedback. They take criticism very personally without regarding the impact of their accused actions. Goes on. Great bosses make a habit of routinely gathering feedback about themselves from employees, peers, and managers. They want to know the good and the bad, so they ask direct questions about their leadership abilities and skills. They can roll with the punches and not let negative feedback keep them down. How they motivate. Bad supervisors motivate with fear. They rely on their position, rank, grade, or title to get people to do the work. Excellent bosses motivate by inspiring and empowering their workforce. They do not use their level of authority to try to motivate employees. More to that. How they handle bad behavior. Bad managers allow toxic behaviors to occur in the office on a routine basis. They might not personally care for the conduct, but they choose to let it be. Good managers are poised to eliminate bad behavior swiftly and tactically. They know that toxic conduct will quickly create a negative environment for everyone. When it comes to developing solutions and new ideas, ineffective leaders believe their ideas and solutions are the best. They're not interested in seeking other perspectives or ideas. Good leaders create an environment that encourages other viewpoints and perspectives. And the article goes on, you can find others. But it's just, I think, again, what kind of leaders do you respond best to? You know, there's an old saying that says that people don't leave bad companies, they leave bad leadership, bad bosses. And I probably paraphrase that, but you know what that's about. The other part of that is this. I've mentioned that I have been in a manager role, and at times I felt like I was very effective. And there were times I didn't feel that I was the best manager. So, you know, it's easy to point fingers. It's easy to talk about someone who was a bad manager, but I've got to be honest with myself sometimes, both in terms of my followership when I had managers and my leadership when I was expecting other people to follow me. Anyway, all right, we've talked about a lot of things. I want to wrap up here by sharing what's coming up. Thank you, first of all, for being here and being a part of this conversation. If I didn't respond to every comment, I'll go back and read them. Hey, next week is our 200th episode. Can you believe that? Episode number 200 of Coffee Breaks. We've been on the air for 4.5 years, and we're celebrating 200. Still working on exactly what our celebration is going to look like, and I'm working with my production team. You know, it's just interesting because I spent a lot of time before we got to the 100th episode planning for that and preparing for what we were going to do. Still, things just got busy here the last few weeks, and I don't have everything put together for next week. So we're working on it, going to reflect on some things from the past 4.5 years. We're going to look forward to some things that are coming up. Everybody gets a humpback whale. No, everybody does not get a humpback whale. Not doing any Oprah types of things for the 200th episode. But listen, if you've got ideas about some things that maybe we can incorporate, don't get too complex with it, because I can't, you know, like have cake delivered to everybody's house or anything like that. But you know where to reach me through Facebook or on, and at the end of this, once again, you know, we'll talk about the where you can share topics and ideas, and that includes next week. But we'll have a celebration. Then in 2 weeks, we're going to have a couple of guests on. One you may be familiar with because she's been on before, Dee Dee Kiso. She has been a guest on here. She has been, excuse me, in the chat many, many times. But she is also working now with a foundation that was founded by and is led by a retired Army Colonel, Christopher Kalenda, PhD, who was an Army colonel leading hundreds of soldiers in Afghanistan. And he's founded this foundation as a way to work with those who've come home from the battlefield with PTSD and with other issues, physical and emotional, to help those whose issues have reached the point of attempted suicide or even suicide, helping those families and the family Gold Star, what are referred to as Gold Star families, those who lost someone in action. And so he's working across multiple lines, and it's going to be an interesting story. I guarantee you'll want to hear Chris Kalenda's story and from Dee Dee, as well as she is helping with this foundation. And then in 3 weeks, we're going to do something. This is actually, believe it or not, the first time in 2023 that we've had to skip a Saturday. I'm going to be traveling. I mentioned I'm going to be going back east to be with Carol. Well, our trip back here is going to be on a Saturday, and it's very likely that I'm going to be trying to get to an airport around the time that we would normally be on. And so on September 16th, not going to have coffee breaks. It says 3 weeks. Is 3 weeks right? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's correct. Just want to make sure I didn't accidentally put something on there that shouldn't be there. And then in 4 weeks, we're going to be covering another topic. They're going, oh, this one doesn't sound exciting. I can promise you, you're going to want to tune in for this. Where There's a Will. Christina Matson is an estate planning, probate, and elder law attorney. You go, whoopee, wow. She's going to talk about, she and I are going to have a conversation about, and you can be part of it, about the importance at every age, every stage of life, every situation of having the right plan in place and how you should go about doing that. It's not going to be boring. It's not an infomercial. It's a legitimate conversation about some very, very important things. Trust me on this and tune in. And no pun intended when I said trust. All right, listen, if you've got topics or guests you would like to see on Coffee Breaks with Steve, including any ideas about next week and how we might go about doing this celebration, you can reach out at cbwsteve@comcast.net to share your ideas. And just a reminder that we are on multiple podcast sites with episodes. And finally, one of the big areas we're going to be working to expand is on YouTube. We're going to be adding some things and making some changes. So I would encourage you and invite you and ask you without begging, if you have not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do so. If you would love to share it with other people so they can be a part of the conversation and meet some of these amazing guests and be part of these topics, I would invite you to do that as well. All right. I've rambled on long, way too long, but again, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for being part of the conversation today and just being a part of this family. As we get to episode 200, I am continually humbled by the reality that there are people who really want to join together in this community, and you're part of a community. This isn't about me. I get to be a facilitator for this time of us coming together. So thank you. Thanks to moderator Kat for helping to keep us on track today in whatever way he was actually doing that. I'm not always sure he's moderating as much as he's maybe trying to instigate, but we can't really have an instigator, Kat. That would just be wrong. Hat tip, meow. Thank you. And a thanks to all of you. And just once again, just want to say to you, please, 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 we talked about some opportunities to do it, but please find a way to make a difference in your world this week. God bless you. Have a great week. I'll see you next time.